Hello and welcome back to Rocket. On today's show, we are sitting down with the brilliant Sam Seaton, who is the CEO at Moneyhub Enterprise. Now, in our conversation with Sam, we talk all about what it was like for her growing up and her early journey in the equestrian space. She had an ambition, which was to qualify for Sydney 2000, and we learn all about this process and what she took away from that. We talk about her goals, we talk about her relationship with goal setting and resilience, her journey with Moneyhub, MBOs, and much, much more. So grab yourself a coffee and enjoy.
So Sam, one thing we're really intrigued about. So are you able to talk to us a little bit about your upbringing? And we know that you have a love of horses and you're in the equestrian world. And if there's any, correlation between that and the flip to business, but maybe a little bit about your childhood for our listeners to understand where you came from and what's brought you to where you are today.
So my childhood, I believe I had a fantastic childhood, which I think is important for lots of different reasons. So I'm quite a fan of, now that I'm older, of actually supporting places and organisations that do help children, because I really think the foundations for life are genuinely made when you're a child. And I was very lucky, I think, to have a dad that was extremely, I guess, if I look back, progressive. So he had, I was the eldest daughter, I had my younger brother. But when I look back, he kind of treated us the same. There was no gender split. I kind of explained this, something that came home to me the other day, is that, so I really liked chopping the wood for our potbelly stove, for our wood burning stove. It was just something I really enjoyed doing. And when I think back on that, I was 12 and I used to chop all the wood on my own for our stove. And I look now around me at my friends with 12-year-olds, and I think, would you let your 12-year-old son or daughter alone with an axe, to get stuck into the wood pile? And I'm not sure I would. So I look back at that and I think, so you can see from that, I think, that we were allowed a lot of freedom. We were given a lot of confidence in our abilities, and there was a lot of trust. And I think actually that's quite important. And they're things that I think you should carry forward to the future in all that you do, not just with your family, but in business. Is, as you all realise, trust is actually quite important. Trusting people to do a job and letting them get on with it and do it in their own way. I'm pretty sure when I did my first efforts with the wood, it was not like my dad would have done, right? I just not possible. But it's pretty quick that you master these things. So I think, very, very lucky to have, and then genuinely, obviously, he also was the big instigator in me ending up doing a degree, because I was obsessed with horses. In fact, I'm still obsessed by horses. It's in my DNA. It's never leaving me. I will be 98 and on the cob, hacking around our lanes, because, I just think that would be a wonderful thing for me to be able to do. But right at that stage, I was incredibly competitive. I had my horse, and genuinely enjoyed eventing, which is dressage, show jumping, and cross country. That was my thing, and I decided that the best thing to do when I left school was to go and ride racehorses for a living, because it was the only way you could get paid to ride in Australia. That was. So I thought, and I can continue with my eventing. And my dad said to me, he said, I don't, that's fine if you want to go and ride racehorses for a living. And he said, but first of all, you have to get a degree. And he said, I don't care if you get a degree in knitting. Like he said, I honestly don't care what you do, but you're getting a degree. He said, because if you hurt yourself riding, you can fall back on whatever you've got a degree in. So he said, but that's what you have to do. So it made some sense. And then my uncle was the second intervention, because I decided I would be a nurse, because all my friends were going to be a nurse. So that sounded like a good idea. Go and get in Australia at that time, it was then a degree qualification to become a nurse. So that's what I thought I would do. And my uncle is a vet, and he said to me, you would make a very poor nurse. And I am like, what do you mean a poor nurse? How can you be a poor nurse? I just thought it was ridiculous. And he said to me, trust me, there are other things that are going to interest you more. And so he took me through the paper, as it was in those days, with all the jobs advertised in the back, from the beginning to the end. And they start with A and they finish with Z. And it wasn't until I got to systems analyst that any of them remotely interested me, So I was working all the way through. And I said to him, what does a systems analyst do? It sounds really interesting. And he said, I have no idea. it's something to do with computing. Go and talk to your computing teacher at school, which is what I did. And so then, he was the one so that was when I put on my, I guess it's, in Australia, you fill out your university entrance, which is, you have 4 selections, and mine was, my, computer science at university, and then nursing. So if I hadn't got into my computer science degree, I'd definitely be a nurse. And I personally think he was wrong. I still think I'd have been an okay nurse. But anyway, so that's what happened. And I did get into my computer science degree, did that, and then actually never wanted to ride a racehorse for a living. Much, I'm sure, to my dad's huge relief, because I'm pretty sure that was his aim. So I thought he went about it quite a clever way, rather than taking me head on and saying, you cannot ride racehorses for a living. So yeah, I guess I grew up a little bit at uni and found other things that were much more interesting. But at the same time, I'd kept riding, never ever gave up my riding. And about 2 years after I finished, I went and worked graduate programmer for Telstra, so equivalent for BT. Had a great time as a graduate developer for them. Still got friends that are actually travelled all over the world from those days. So lovely to have that. But at the same time, kept riding. And actually, 2 years in, I got longlisted for the Sydney 2000 Olympics. So they start to pick the kind of squad to prepare. About 6 years out, genuinely, they've spotted horses, riders that they think could be right. But they said to me, which is the same for everyone, if you want to get shortlisted, you have to have competed internationally. So that doesn't mean that you have to stay, obviously you can go for a year, ride on the international eventing circuit, come back to Australia, and then you've kind of ticked that box, and you can then be you'll meet the criteria. So I had to go to the US or the UK and compete. That was my choice, really. That's where the international eventing circuits are. I mean, the UK is the best, but the US also has quite a good circuit. So I thought that was ridiculous, genuinely, honestly ridiculous, because when you ride at a top level to win, you are on the edge. And when you're on the edge, it either goes very well or very bad, which means you're either in the dirt or you kind of win. And I thought traveling halfway around the world to end up, in the dirt, in the water, in the ditches, just didn't seem to make a lot of sense. And I never really thought about it, but I just thought, I love what I do, but I'm not 100% sure that is sensible. And I think that tells you a little bit about me, because I think I am quite practical and I'm quite sensible, like at my core, quite practical person, I think. And one thing I would say is you can't change that. So that is something that, you've got to kind of, I think at some point recognize, you have attributes, don't you, that kind of make you who you are. And I think that's fine. I think there's nothing wrong with that. I think you should, I guess, celebrate who you are a little bit.
Absolutely.
And go with the flow. Yeah.
So in fact, one of my questions was what brought you to England, but it sounds like you've just answered that. So it sounds like your question career brought you to the UK. And actually, Harry, I know that you had some questions about, or you had some life experience about that.
A little bit. Well, actually, so other half, she's actually trains racehorses. So she actually is in that career right now. She's actually getting out of that. She went to British racing school, I think at 16, went through that process and now does that on a day-to-day. But she's now realizing the progression in training racehorses is quite limited from where she wanted to go. And it was either sort of compete, get into that route or the different route, and she's now looking at other options. But one thing that I really admire about the people that are in that industry is if you fall off the horse, you're getting back on. If a horse stands on your foot, you're getting back on. The resilience and just getting up and cracking on is amazing.
Yes, I actually think it applies to any sport done at quite a high level. I think there is this toughness that you have to have, and I do think it does you well in life, if you like, which is why I would always encourage people to do sport, to quite a bit, find what it is that you kind of quite like. But it does teach you, it teaches you about success and failure. It teaches you to, so for example, we were talking about this the other day, about success and failure. And it's like, well, you can look at it two ways. You can look at things as successful steps, or you can look at that you're always failing, and you will never get anywhere if you evaluate yourself and your life as failing all the time. So one of the things you have to do is you have to build on what's successful. And so I think that is something that sport teaches you, because you can only do that by looking at what you're doing well and do it better, and strive always to achieve more, but don't kill yourself up or beat yourself up, if you're not there yet. So this ability to always aspire to be better, I think is something that sport probably leaves you with. And the horse is probably, there's another element to the horse that I would say is wonderful, because actually you're working with an animal. And when you work with an animal, you've got to do it together. And I know it's not a team effort with people, but it genuinely is a team effort with your horse. And you can't do it on your own. So it's a partnership. So that's really unique to horse riding. And the other thing that's unique to horse riding is how you compete on the level playing field, male and female. There is no, 100-meter sprint for the women and for the men, because it doesn't need to be. And I think that's slightly unusual about our sport as well, that I obviously had the privilege of being in and riding at the very top level. But I just can't underestimate the things that I learned. To your point, it's not just resilience, like how to cope with stress. So, for example, when I did my first badminton, from the steeplechase into the 10-minute box, they have, because of the crowds at badminton, it's like, it's hundreds of thousands of people. So the two men in bowler hats take you in either side of your horse, to guide you through. And you can imagine, you've grown up in Australia, a bowler hat doesn't exist. It's like they're in the TV, And so then suddenly I've got two men either side of me. I'm 26. I've got two men either side of me on these horses. And by the time I got to the 10-minute box, I was sitting in my chair. You get this 10-minute break before you set off again. And my knees were knocking together. I was that nervous. And I thought to myself, I can't ride. How do you ride when your legs are like jelly? It's like, this isn't going to work. I'm going to fall off at the first fence. And it was my husband that said to me, he said, you'll be fine. Because I said to him, look at my legs, like they're wobbling. I said, I've never had that happen before. That's nerves. That's that kind of all that pressure of not the sport or the event, which you've done a number of times before. It's the atmosphere and the environment. And suddenly I look back at that and think, you see, that's why the Australian team won't pick you unless you've competed internationally. It's probably not how you absolutely do on that, but it's the fact that you've been exposed to that pressure and that intensity, and you've come through it. You've done it, you've been there, you get thrown in again. Incredible how you cope the second time when you go back. That's all kind of like you've banked that. So that's one thing I would take away to your point, is that sport pushes you out of your comfort zone, and somehow in business to succeed and to do well in your career, you have to learn how to push yourself out of the comfort zone. And I think we do that by choice. So that's why you've got to almost find things that will do it to you.
And I can imagine there's lots of discipline required as well, with horses, whether it's mucking out or grooming, and there's so much rigor with the discipline. And then it's almost like you're almost disciplined to continue to push yourself. And the example you said about your knees knocking together, that's just one area where your comfort zone is pushed. But when when you fall off the horse, you get back on. You're almost to get the successes, you've got to go through these different layers of failure. And actually, one of my mentors in the US, he was talking about his upbringing, and his father would basically ask his children, how many times they'd failed that day, and they would celebrate the failures, because the failures all add up to the success, to the successes, and because that's life, isn't it? So I guess if you've got this experience where you've got that discipline, you're taking risks, you're not. You're getting back on your horse, as Harry mentioned. It's kind of a nice analogy. And for those listeners out there that don't have a racehorse or access to that, it's finding some rigor, finding something that you're passionate about. But it's okay to fail. It's okay to fall off your horse, and just look at those failures as actually another step towards success. Because I think a lot of people do get hung up on what they fail at, but they fail to recognize that actually the foundations of success are built on lots of failures.
Yeah, you've only got to look at how we learn to walk and ride a bike and all the things we do as children. We wouldn't get very far if the first time we fell off our bike or fell over and grazed our knees when we were running. There's no way we'd all be where we are now. So it is in us, as you just said, to fail and fail often and move on. And so I don't know why we get. Is it that as we get older, we get more aware of it and more conscious of it? I don't know what happens, but it's a bit of a shame, actually, because you almost hang on to that resilience of a child, isn't it? Yeah.
And I think in this day and age as well, we have so much access to all the, the social media. I have 3 teenage girls, and I'm on a mission to kind of keep them alive, keep them safe, and keep them healthy. And there's so much pressure on these youngsters at the moment. And as we actually chatted to Daniel Priestley the other day, he's one of my favorite business authors, and he was talking about there's this statistically irrelevant fact that that beautiful girl or that beautiful boy, they've got everything, but actually to get there, it's, well, number one, it's irrelevant because it's very unlikely. Anyway, I guess I'm lost my train of thought a little bit, but we're only seeing the successes, but we're filtering out a lot of the failures. That
the algorithms even on Instagram are automatically putting the most touched up, the most sort of perfect imagery on when the algorithms work. I mean, when you go onto the explore page, they're only showing the best, the most liked, all the top, and then it's the instant comparison between yourself and those people. And I think it's really interesting, some of the stuff you're saying there, Sam. And one thing I wanted to touch on is your thoughts on sort of goal setting, because you talk about sort of, if you fall off the bike, you then, if we just fell off and just walked away and gave up, then we wouldn't get anywhere. But on another angle, so I guess if you've got a goal and you work, you have to draw the process. When you get to that goal, then what? Do you set another goal? Because you've got that big goal that you work, it's motivating you, it's getting you up in the morning, and then once you've reached it, it's actually, oh, okay, now what? So what are your thoughts on, I guess, goal setting? How has goal setting been important for you in your journey? And just a bit about that would be great.
So there's 2 things I think are really important in this part, and it's just, I mentioned it before I forget it, which is and it's related to what you've all just talked about in terms of social media and perhaps an influence that we didn't have, the older ones of us, not obviously Harry, but as much as what the youngsters have is now, which is that I think we've got to somehow find a way not to take things as personally as what we do. So that's one of the things that I learned actually at 12. I can still remember it. And it was learning to ride. So it was learning to ride, and I kept being told, something I was getting wrong. And I got very upset because obviously you're trying really hard and you think you're doing a good job, and then someone's telling you you're not. So it's quite tricky. But at the end of this lesson, this man said to me, he said, you are going to get nowhere fast if you keep taking things so personally. And it's only later on that I thought to myself, what he said to me is, he said, you need to accept criticism. He said, it's the only way you'll get better. And he said, I'm only telling you, what you're doing wrong so you can fix it and be better. He said, I'm not telling it to you to make you feel, unhappy. And that was one of my lessons in life, if you like, which I still carry today. And I wonder if actually that's something that would be great to try and help people, young people, in the world that they're being influenced. To your point, Harry, about everyone gets stuff like, but actually getting things wrong or being criticized, or it's not to take things so personally would probably help everyone a bit more. So that's something I thought is worth sharing. And then on the goal setting, I have it's quite simple. So to me, you think about what you can achieve in the very short term, and that's like what I call one step in front of the other. And you just kind of get the job done. So there's that type of goal setting. And then if you do that, quite often it's you start to get to a point where you wonder why you can't step up to another level of operation. And that could be in your riding, your sport. It can be in your even in how fast you read. I mean, it's everything you do. If you think about it, there's people that do it better than you. I mean, it doesn't matter what you do. There'll be someone that does it better. And sometimes you think, well, how do they do that better? And you can't just be better. You can't just read a book twice as fast tomorrow as what you do today. But there will be techniques and there'll be things you can do to be better. And some of them are quite boring and tedious. And they're the ones you have to put one step in front of the other. But if you don't do that, you will never get the next step up. So I always think you've got to break it down so I want to read a book twice as fast. So what do I have to do that? Well, that means I have to do a speed reading course, which is going to be quite tedious for 6 weeks. And unless I do that, I'm never going to be able to even read a bit faster, let alone twice as fast. And then it's about doing the bit, along the way. And if you can get into that mindset, what's really lovely is that all of a sudden you'll be reading the book twice as fast, and you sit back and think, how did that happen? So I don't even think you have to you have to think, where do I want to get to? Then roll it back. What are the steps? And as soon as you start taking those steps, you'll end up on another level of operation, and then go, right, so I'm going to make, obviously you don't want to read a big book 4 times as fast now, but what I'm getting at is suddenly you'll have done that. And it's amazing how we work.
I'd like to take this moment to introduce to you our sponsor, Flexi, the must-have app to track and manage your subscriptions in one place. So most of us have multiple subscriptions nowadays for things like streaming services, gym memberships and food deliveries. These are great and take the hassle out of buying everyday products that we consume regularly, but it can be hard to keep track of them. That's where Flexi comes in handy, using super secure technology to connect your accounts to see all your subscriptions in a single dashboard, putting you in control of your spending. And what's more, Flexi's subscription marketplace allows you to discover new products you may love, all easy to pause, resume or cancel in a swipe or two. So give Flexi a try. It's free to download from the App Store, or check out their website at www.flexiapp.uk. That's FLEXY app.uk. Back to the podcast.
I love the idea of starting with the end in mind, and then working back and figuring out the steps, because you can break something down that might seem overwhelming, but if you break it down in little chunks, then you're going to be able to put a plan together to reach your goal. But like you said, you also have to be proactive to find more efficient ways of maybe getting something done, whether it's taking a course or finding a mentor or whatever that is.
Yeah, and access to information is so much easier now. And the one thing I would say is if you find yourself not willing to take those steps, you sometimes question how much you really want the end goal. Was it something you just thought might be good? Because I think you find those steps along the way quite easy, when actually your desire to read a book twice as fast or ride a horse or whatever it is quite strong and in you. It's kind of just in you. So that's why I said also don't worry if actually you decide you want to read a book twice as fast and find you really don't want to read a book twice as fast. Like, it's not that much interest. Move on. There'll be other things you want to do.
Well, there's actually 3 topics that I'd love to hear your thoughts on. Maybe I'll just start with one. So one is let me have a think. Which one is? I was thinking about the 80-20 rule. Actually, Pareto's law. It's like what's most important. One theme is the transition from. I don't know whether you would have described yourself as an intrapreneur during your 15-year stint at Towers Watson, and transitioning into entrepreneurship or the management buyout. What was the journey? And then the other piece, obviously, is your thoughts on gender inequality in the boardroom. And I think you've touched on some character traits that you have that you just put yourself out there, and so just your thoughts on that, because I know that's an area of you're passionate about, and also when we've spoken in the past, you've been very, I would say, you have a very generous approach and attitude towards helping other entrepreneurs that might be at a different stage to you, and I think that's a really nice quality.
Yeah, well, I think it's just going back to start with the first one that you just mentioned. I think it's really important to be kind to people. I mean, I don't think we are kind enough to our friends, family. I just think life has got very busy, and even I fall down, on it, and I have to pick myself up on it. So I think, genuinely, if you haven't got time for others to help them, I think you're missing out on a whole part of life that is amazing. So that would just be something I think, is worth keeping in mind. And also, you always will be too busy. I mean, everyone is always, so if you don't make the time to do these things, then it's it'll never happen. And then I think the entrepreneur versus entrepreneur. So yes, I don't think I was born like Harry, who's already started 3 businesses. That I mean is amazing. But I think in life you will have phases of things that interest you or distract you or take you on a journey, and I just think that that's fine. Do you know what I mean? So I was following, I guess, a love and a passion with my horses, and you have to accept you can't do everything. So although when you're busy, you've got to make time for people. When you want to achieve something, and I think we'll all know this, if you want to, I guess, ride a horse internationally, or you want to start a business, I call it being all in. At some point, you've got to go all in. And actually, I think sometimes people in general are not ready to go all in, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it doesn't mean that you won't want to go all in at some point in your life. So I think even if you're not all in right now listening to this, like you're thinking to yourself, yeah, I'm not, that doesn't mean that in 10 years you won't be sitting there going, oh, I'm all in this now, whatever it is you're doing. So because certain things will come along, and for what I can't really say what it is, but suddenly you are all in. It's like the stars line up and then you're all in. And I don't always think you can predict when all those stars will line up. And the only thing that I would say to people is when they do line up, take them. Don't be scared to take the chances that come along where they're your opportunity to do that. That's the one thing I would say, because there is this saying that you only get, 3 or 4 or 5, or there's a certain number of times when all the stars line up and you can go all in on something. And so I guess I would say I probably had 1 or 2 that I didn't see in those early years. And I suspect that's because I didn't come from a background where starting a business from scratch was something that I thought I should do. It's rightly or wrongly, and I do believe that's because of my gender. So as much as I had fantastic role models around me as a child, the entrepreneurs were all men. My mum stayed at home and she looked after, in effect, the family in the home. So I think role models are quite important now. I didn't have that. I didn't have any. If I look back, I didn't have any role models that were women in positions of business. I didn't have any. So I have a feeling it didn't occur to me for quite a while. It wasn't seeded anywhere in my head, even though I was perfectly capable of being an entrepreneur. So I think that's very important for role models to be around and think that anyone can do anything they want to do. And even though my dad instilled that in me, it still wasn't quite enough. And it came out later, didn't it? So it came out when the MBO from Towers Perrin became an option. And then I kind of haven't looked back since then, because then I was able to see another MBO with Moneyhub. And now, I think I understand business a lot better starting. I wouldn't hesitate to start a business now. It wouldn't worry me at all.
And you're fearless too. I mean, it's because I wonder when the stars do align, you wonder, I just know that a lot of people will not take that step because of fear or the way that they're conditioned. So I think your comment about you can do anything you want, or you said something along those lines, you just need to put yourself out there. And, so what if, sometimes the 90% of things that we worry about often never happen. We just convince ourselves that we can't do something. So I think it's a really good message for those folks that might have an opportunity to kind of take that first step. And it's okay, if are they going to die? Probably not. Obviously you wouldn't recommend that, but
no, and it's really funny you should say that, because it is important. So when we moved to the UK, I had never left Australia. I'd never been outside Australia. So now I'm picking up a horse, flying to the other side of the world, and I have no jobs. I've left my job. I've quit. And it was actually really scary. So at one point, I had to sit myself down and think, so what's the worst that can happen from this? Genuinely. So I'm going to quit my job, spend a lot of money taking my horse around the world, and come back to Australia having achieved absolutely nothing. What's the worst thing? And I thought to myself, the worst outcome from all of this is I end up back in the family home in my old bedroom with nothing, no money, and absolutely nothing, and going and getting interviewing and getting another job from my old bedroom and starting again. That to me was like, that's the worst that can happen. And then I thought, and it's not that bad, is it? It's not great. I don't really want to be back in my, back in the old bedroom at home with no money and no job, having had some money and a good job. Not ideal, but if that's the worst that can happen, it's okay, isn't it? So I think that's the other thing you you should sometimes just ask yourself, is the worst that can happen like that bad?
I think that's interesting. And I think also how you've kind of gone about that, I guess it's saying, because what some people will do is they think, oh, that's the worst that can happen, I'm not going to do it. And I think what is great is that you thought about that, but then you continued and you assessed it and realized actually it's not that bad. Give it a go anyway. And I think that's a great way of people need to think, is that what is the worst can happen, but also what could happen if I do go for it, if I do take that star, that alignment, and actually go for it, and what could I achieve? Which I think is a great message to the audience. And actually, sorry, I want to jump. One thing you mentioned a couple of times was MBO. Now, just for our listeners, what is an MBO? And yeah, what's it all about?
Yeah, so it's MBO stands for management buyout. And it is a slightly unusual, because most people start businesses like Harry, like, you start a business with a great idea and off you go. You might do it with some friends. So that is a very typical way to start a business. But I have been very fortunate to do 2 MBOs. And the reason for that, I think, is because I ended up working for quite a long time before I ended up, in effect, running my own business. So what that meant is, when you work, I worked for Towers Perrin, who merged with another company called Watson Wyatt. And at that point, when they merge, when 2 companies merge, quite often they look at, when they merge the 2 companies, what do they want the strengths of that new business to be? And sometimes they think, do you know what, these things are outliers and we probably could sell them off or let them go, or, or actually finish them, like just wind them up, because actually they don't make sense anymore for what we want to do as a larger business that we're putting together. And when businesses do that, there are opportunities for management teams in those businesses potentially to buy them. And that happens all the time. Like in the world, as I sit here speaking, there'll be someone doing a management buyout of a business from a business that, and just what it means quite often is, when you take that little business out and give it its own airtime and dedication, amazing things happen with that business in its own space, because sometimes they are square pegs in round holes, is what these businesses were. So they were never given, the airtime or the bandwidth, if you like, that they should have been given in the first place. And actually the only way to do it sometimes is actually to buy them out. And that's why I think Richard Branson tries, every time a business gets beyond between 50 and 100 people, he tries to ring fence it and carve it out and say, right, there's the own business, so that he kind of keeps this kind of innovative small business mentality and nature. But actually, it's just, instead of letting a business grow to 5,000 people, he'll actually have lots of little businesses, that grow. And I think that philosophy is why a lot of management buyouts happen. And that's what I've been very fortunate to do twice.
Now, so you're currently Moneyhub is, I think it was, when did you join? It was 2016, was it? 2016. You've been through an amazing MBO. Where does the journey go from now? What are you looking to do in the next 5 years? You got any new goals, any new things you'd like to achieve? What's that all about?
And it might be good just to talk a little bit about Moneyhub. What is Moneyhub for our listeners out there that don't know Moneyhub? And what is the overarching vision?
So the reason I love Moneyhub so much, and I feel like I've kind of found my way to the best place for me personally, is because obviously all through my career with Towers Perrin, which is financial services consultancy, and helped manufacture products for providers, what I learned is that people like us, consumers, really haven't got much hope of understanding money, like how it works, in reality. And that's not because we're rubbish or useless or can't understand it. It's just because for most people, money is a facilitator to do stuff. It's not something they want to particularly understand the ins and outs of. And I always relate this to driving a car. I'm sure I'm perfectly capable of taking an engine apart and putting it back together. I think, if I had to do that, I could. Do I have any desire to do that? No, I have no desire to do that. But if you made it that's what I had to do to get my license to drive a car, then I know I'd still be on the bus. And so that's how it feels a bit like with money, is that everyone's still on the bus, not because they necessarily don't want to or couldn't have had the freedom of driving a car, but just the barrier to getting there is too hard. So I think that there's 2 things that have to happen, is that we make we make people's money, make it easier for them to make it go further, work harder for them. So take some of that pain out. So I guess in effect, enable you to drive the car without having to take the engine apart. I mean, actually get you driving the car and give you that freedom without you having to worry about the engine, for example, but do it in a way that it means that you can actually really benefit. So for me, a lot of people go about life, and actually as you get older, you get wiser and you understand more about money, and you wish you'd known that when you were 18. So if we can, with Moneyhub, get people to start earlier and actually make their money go further, work harder, and know what's the next best thing to do with their money effortlessly, that would be amazing. So that's like the philosophy of Moneyhub. The way we do that is to obviously sell our product, which is a platform, to enterprises, so companies that do that with lots of people. And the reason I chose to go down that path is because it means that we have commercialized the business quicker. So we have a revenue income, which makes the business sustainable and able to grow a bit easier. And secondly, I think we reach more people. So if you think about all the businesses out there that have customers already that could be better off, it's a quicker way to get millions and millions of people better off. So that's kind of like fundamentally the philosophy. And I guess how we do that is, we have a money management app, which people white label, and it connects all your bank accounts, it connects all your investments. So it brings all of your assets and liabilities, your property, and then it runs a machine learning algorithm over the top. So it's like a robot that tries to literally understand what you're doing with your money and gives you insight and gives you tips and nudges about what you personally might want to think about next with your money. And so that's a journey that you can start here, get to here, and actually that means that everyone ends up in a better place if they want to be. I'm also a really big fan of choice. So I think if people want to live like a champagne lifestyle today and baked beans lifestyle when they're older, I actually have no problem with that. I think there's nothing wrong with that. But I think it would be nice to know that you're going to live champagne now and baked beans later. I think you should just know that. And if you would like to live maybe not just baked beans later, maybe do prosecco now and have slightly up go on. But do you know what I mean? You adjust it. I just want people to be informed.
So on your enterprise customers, what would be your perfect customer?
Well, we have a few actually. We have enterprises that genuinely want to give the customers that they have what they need. So rather than the old way, which is very typical and traditional, where we sell products and services and we just try and figure out a match, traditionally, and I think this is how anything is sold actually, is we want to sell all of us products and services. But to be honest, we probably in the past haven't really cared too much about whether it's the right one for you or whether or not it's the right time for you to have that product or service. We need to sell it. So if you stand still long enough, we're going to sell you that product or service, right? So those days are gone. What you have to do now is you have to sell products and services to customers that need them at the time they need them. And that's the new model, that's coming out, but it's very difficult for a lot of enterprises to shift, I think, mindset, DNA, to being something that's very used to selling products and services to being like, well, what does Harry need today? And if we don't have a product or service that Harry needs today, do we have a partner that we could go and partner with that could help Harry today? That is a completely different mindset for an enterprise. And they're the ones that are amazing, the ones that have made that mental shift.
Can you comment about how to attract A players and retain them? Your experience just building Moneyhub.
So when you build a company, I think of any team, I think you need lots of different types of people in the team. So this is going to sound terrible, but I don't think of it as building A players. I know that sounds, because I think you'll end up, well, I can't really use the England team at the moment, the soccer team, can I? Because they did really well last night, didn't they? So, but traditionally, I think you'll all realise, me coming from Australia, not knowing anything about soccer or football, as you call it, but just so you know, in Australia, football isn't soccer. So anyway, but just so you all know, I mean, you bring amazing talent together, doesn't mean they necessarily win, does it? So I think you've got to understand that bringing a team or a company or people together, you need all types of people to make that a winning business or winning team. So I would say it's all about having the right mix of people and not trying to just get one type. And I'm also a little bit, when you grow a business from small, it's about the people, not the roles. And then unfortunately, as a company grows up, that changes a bit, and you've got to try and actually sort out, because you can't have everyone doing everything anymore. So at some point, there comes a point when you have to sit down and go, right, actually, we need some, kind of segmentation, if you like, so people can focus in on X, Y, and Z. And that's a bit of a shift. And that's always quite a shift for a small business to go through. That's quite hard, but it will have to go through that at some point in its journey. But to start with, if you're starting small, it's all about the people and what they can do to help. And half of it is their energy, enthusiasm, and willingness to get the job done.
I like the way you answered that, actually, because I think, a young business needs a lot of generalists that can do lots of different things. And then as you grow, you need that more specialist laser focus. And actually, who are we to, if it's not our area of expertise, it's very subjective, isn't it? I think of an A player as someone that's awesome. And really good at what they do, and someone that delivers what they say they're going to do. But I guess everyone has a different perception of what an A player is. And I guess you do need, do you need the B players? Well, perhaps you do, the folks that want to work 9 to 5 but they're very reliable and they do their job and leave. But then those other folks that might want to push the boundaries and, be a bit more ambitious. So I think it's probably we need a mix, and it's a team. Like you said, it's a collective team, and not necessarily just one individual.
No, and also you've got to remember about the what people want. So so my big observation is that to get the best people, genuinely, you will need to accept that we live in a country that I think is very privileged. So we don't live in a country where potentially you don't know where your next meal is coming from, and that's a very different mindset. And I think you've got to accept that when you live in a privileged country, actually work-life balance is really important, flexibility is important. And actually, if you want some of what you would call the A players, I think sometimes you're going to have to be actually quite accommodating, and so that doesn't mean they're going to be able to work 24/7, like some of you might have to work to get a business off the ground. But if you want that talent or that input, you might have to be very flexible to bring that into your business. And I think that's possibly sometimes where we get a little bit of a mindset, everyone has to be all in 24/7. I would say, I'm not sure that will build the most productive and best business. And you've also got to then not get upset when, for example, I'm all in 24/7. And I've got a couple of people who are, genuinely, absolutely 100% all in when they're there. But, they have to go and do X, Y, and Z in their life. And they've got to do that. They've got commitments elsewhere. But for that, 6 hours that they're there for the day, when they can give that 6 hours, they are the best 6 hours and the best people to be giving that. I think there's a slight mindset shift that has to change. And for that reason, I say that's why we will bring more women into and keep them, because rightly or wrongly, a lot of women still end up being the main carer, whether it's for children or for parents, elderly parents. It seems to be what happens. I'm not saying it's always the case, and I'm not saying it won't change, but probably in the next few years, it's still got to be acknowledged that is the case. So if you want some of the brilliance of those people in your business, I think you probably have to be more accommodating than what perhaps a lot of startups are.
No, it's a really interesting point you touched on. And it's also about nurturing these amazing people, because they might be in a particular part of their life that they can't dedicate even 8 hours. Might be they can only do part-time because they have children at home or whatever. It doesn't matter which gender they are. But I think it is an exciting time, I think, to be a female in the business world right now, because there is a change, and this patriarchal society is shifting. And as I mentioned earlier, I have 3 teenage daughters. I want to raise them to believe they can do anything they put their mind to. And actually, I was a bit horrified last year to learn that only 1% of VC money goes to female founders. And actually 10% goes to mixed gender startups. Flexi is a mixed gender startup. 10% of VC money goes to mixed genders. So I think, even though it's not the 1%, it's like, why does 90% go to, white males? It's just, it seems to be, and certainly, if you have diversity, you can solve bigger problems, surely, so it's like, it's a huge opportunity, even for GDP, to get more diversity into the business, into the workplace.
Well, yeah, I mean, I find it quite amusing because I'm like, if I was an investor, I would invest in the mixed or the female only, because by definition, because of that lack of funding, we have to make funding go further and work harder and be more innovative with how you survive as a business. So I would argue we have to actually work a lot harder to make the commercial side of the business, there's more focus on it, because you can't not, because there isn't this never-ending stream of money that just lands on you. So ironically, I think they've got it, they're missing out on what I call, a slight, in effect, upside that they're not quite seeing it. But I think it's actually, for the VC world, I think it's worse than conscious bias, which is, the different levels. I think it's truly unconscious bias. I just don't think they see it yet. I mean, when it becomes conscious bias, then you can actually influence it, can't you? Because you've got an awareness. But at the moment, I really don't think the awareness is there.
No, it's really interesting. It's fascinating. It really interests me. And in fact, one guy that stands out, just came to my mind, a guy called Muhammad Yunus, who founded Germain Bank, and it started in the 70s when he was an economics professor, and he unchained, I think, 45 people from loan sharks for $27, and they were literally going to be indebted for life. And Germain Bank has now grown hugely, and 99%, I think it's 90. Well, it was over 99% of the microloans that the bank provides are to women, because they are more responsible with those. They make the funds go further, and they're not going to waste it. So actually, I think, just back to the VC conversation, to have that balance. I'm not saying that males are reckless. I mean, it depends on the personality of the person. Doesn't matter whether you're male or female. But to have that balanced gender and that diversity is really key. Yeah, you would think, wouldn't you? Why this unconscious bias you talked about? Why is that? Why is that?
I mean, you've got me off on one now. But I don't know if the Philharmonic Orchestra in the US, they couldn't find any female violinists. It's on YouTube. You'll be able to look it up. It's amazing. But and they couldn't figure out why, because there are genuinely amazing women violinists. So they were like, this is just, there's something wrong with our process. They got consultants in to look at the process. They fixed the process. They put it behind a curtain so that you couldn't see, who the person was, and they still kept picking men, for the orchestra. And they were like, this is not right. And anyway, they then had another consultant in who said that no, you can hear them walk onto the stage, so you know whether it's a male or a female. And they're like, but that shouldn't make a difference. And they're like, yes, but it is. And they were like, no, they were not having it. The judges were like, that is not, no way are we picking men because we can hear it's men walking onto the stage. And they're like, I think you are. So anyway, they then carpeted it so you couldn't hear anyone walk onto the stage, and they fixed that. Suddenly it just changed. So that shows the power of unconscious bias, doesn't it? I mean, for all of us in different ways, but it's very strong. So you've got to go quite extreme measures to get rid of it. And I would argue the VC's world's got a long way to go. Well, they're going to make it.
Could you talk about the Open 51 Association, which seemed to be connected with the end of the conversation there? Just do you want to kind of promote that a little bit?
Yes, it's just a group of us, and for any women that want to have more airtime, if you like. I mean, it's really genuinely there's two reasons we started it. One, because we just think women are not getting enough airtime, in terms of representation at conferences and all sorts. And the feedback you get from the conference organisers is they can't find any women, that are specialists in their area. And it's like that's just not right. So we thought, right, let's make sure we've always got women who are specialists in their area to give to these conference organisers and allow them to easily pick. So that was one thing. And the second thing was really about data, which is that we're very worried as we move into more of the algorithms and the bias, that's going to make its way. Well, it already has, but because of how much effort you have to go to make sure the bias isn't there, we really want to try and make a lot more awareness about not letting that bias creep in, or otherwise, well, I think at the moment, back to your board question, we're 300 years away from having gender equality at the board, let alone ethnic equality. So 300 years, and it's just a bit like, well, in 300 years, all the algorithms will be doing it wrong, so it won't be 300 years, it'll be forever, won't it? So we have to kind of really up our game, in terms of the data and the algorithms.
Brilliant. Well, that's probably a good place to end. It's been a pleasure having you, Sam.
Thank you very much.
Is there? How can we find you? How can anyone find you or MoneyHub? Any URLs or anything that you'd like to point our listeners to?
So I am on LinkedIn. I'm going to put my hand up and say that I am not a big social media user. I mean, I just something that's never quite made it onto my fetish or radar or whatever.
Radar. Yeah.
But LinkedIn also, just by all means email me. I mean, sam.seaton@moneyhub.com. I mean, I am genuinely very interested in helping people, and I have no problem finding time to do that.
Wonderful. And last bit of advice that you would leave our listeners.
Be brave. Going back to that challenge bit. When in doubt, be brave. And we have a saying in the horse world, which you can go and buy these online, but put your brave pants on. And literally, our brave pants have got brave pants, on our knickers. Literally, when you're feeling a bit worried, just go and get your brave pants, put them on, and off you go.
Amazing,
fantastic,
brilliant. Well, yeah, thank you so much. It's been great to have you on the show.
Thank you, Sam.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Rocketbot. If you want to be kept up to date with all the latest guests we've got coming on the show, all of our latest conversations, the best way to do that is to follow us on social media. And that's on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and it's at We Are Rocketpod. Of course, thank you to our awesome sponsor, Flexi, who is the mecca for all your subscriptions. They've got an amazing array of subscriptions for you to discover, from food to drink, beauty and grooming, health and fitness, lifestyle, gifts, and much, much more. Thank you as always. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you next time.